Representative Balser of Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the members. I rise to give my farewell remarks after serving in this House for 26 years. What does 26 years look like? I have served with 4 House Speakers, 6 governors, and 454 representatives. I was here when our nation was attacked on September 11, 2001. I was here when this city was attacked during the Boston Marathon. I was here for first-in-the-nation events like marriage equality and universal health care. I was here when, for the first time in Massachusetts history, a woman stepped into the job of governor, and again, when the first woman was elected governor. And I was here when the late, great Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and we stepped up to protect women's access to abortion. It has been my great honor to have been part of history here in this great Commonwealth. And now I'm retiring. Mr. Speaker, one of the things I have always found to be interesting is that members enter and leave this institution at different points in their own life. Many enter at a relatively younger age and move on to other jobs. For me, I entered midlife after I had already enjoyed a full and meaningful other career. And so as I leave, I reflect not only on my years serving in the House, but all my working years. I'm really retiring. As I look back, I feel blessed to have had 2 meaningful careers. My first career was in mental health. An interesting factoid: I am the first licensed clinical psychologist to ever serve in the Massachusetts legislature. When I was elected to the Massachusetts House, it was essentially a midlife career change. When people ask me why I made the switch, I answer, as only a psychologist would, that it all goes back to my childhood. I was born into a Jewish American family a few short years after the end of the Second World War, in the shadow of the Holocaust. I was told by my parents of blessed memory, from a very early age, that the worst crimes imaginable had happened to the Jewish people in Europe, and that it was my job and that of my siblings, and I guess by extension that of our generation, to make sure that nothing like that ever happened again. Not to our people, not to any people. I guess I got the memo because by the time I was in high school, I was marching for civil rights for Black Americans, and by college for peace in Southeast Asia. I should add parenthetically that it has been very meaningful to me to have served in this House with colleagues who come from that part of the world for whom I so desperately wanted peace. As a young adult, my political activism continued in what we then called the Women's Liberation Movement, and then in support of the emerging gay rights movement. Although deeply committed to movements for peace and social justice, I never considered politics for a career. I took my parents' message to mean that only a career that involved helping people would be consistent with our family's values. But I was drawn to helping people with their emotional lives, and so I worked in mental health for close to 30 years. As a mother of young children, I became involved in my community and found myself running for the Newton Board of Aldermen, where I served for 8 years, while maintaining my psychology practice. I felt drawn back into politics, wanting, just as I had as a young person, to make a difference in terms of social justice. But this time, not so much by marching in the streets, but rather running for the state legislature. I never really stopped being a psychologist, though. As many of you may know, I made mental health public policy a top priority. I am proud to have played a part in ensuring mental health parity in our state. It was something the speaker had something to do with as well. It was my legislation in 2008 that expanded our earlier parity bill to include addiction, as well as other conditions that had been initially omitted. And it was an amendment of mine that protected mental health in the Universal Health Care Bill, which became a model for the nation. And I have advocated for decriminalizing mental illness and addiction, arguing that these are illnesses and not crimes, and should be treated in our healthcare system, not our criminal justice system. There are other accomplishments of which I am proud, namely, ending the practice of charging women more than men for the same insurance policies, and extending our automatic sprinkler system requirements to prevent fire fatalities, legislation I advanced in the wake of a tragic Newton fire. And I am proud that my filing legislation for 24 years finally resulted in the Public Lands Preservation Act, which will protect our public parks into the future. No one does any of this work alone, Mr. Speaker, and so I would like to thank a whole bunch of people. First, I thank the voters of the 12th Middlesex District, which over the years has included different parts of Newton and Brookline, for putting their faith in me 13 times. I have always been extremely proud of the district I represent. They are engaged people who want very much for Massachusetts to have world-class public systems, education, healthcare, transit. At the same time, they believe strongly that an essential role of government is to provide a strong safety net for those who are less fortunate. It was they who made sure that each budget cycle I advocated for civil legal aid services to make sure that low-income people have access to justice. It was they who were glad that I advocated for those with mental illness or disabilities or aging adults. And they cared deeply about social justice. They were completely with me in favor of marriage equality. And they encouraged me to file the Safe Communities Act so that our immigrant community will feel safe. Many of my constituents have been fortunate in life, but they don't forget where they came from. It has been an honor to represent them. There are colleagues and groups of colleagues I'd like to thank. The Progressive Caucus and the Women's Caucus have been important supports for me over the years. Another caucus, less formally organized but emotionally meaningful, has been the Jewish Caucus, or what we like to call the Kosher Caucus. That connection has been particularly important this past year. I cannot imagine, having been here these past 26 years, without the friendship of the other lady from Newton. As we refer to each other in Newton, my partner in crime. And speaking of partners, I want to also mention the other lady from Newton, the senator. The senator from Newton and I sat next to each other at the Newton Board of Aldermen before we both ran for the legislature, where our partnership has continued. The three of us, the three ladies from Newton, have a wonderful relationship. Never did any House Senate issues enter our delegation's work with the community. It has been a very special part of my years here to have a friendship with those two wonderful women. And then there's the back of the 3rd Division. I have always said that the House is like elementary school. You get to be best friends with the people you sit near. A special shout out to the gentleman from Waltham, whose wise counsel and willingness to schmooze have always meant a lot. I served with 4 speakers, and I'd like to thank each for their leadership. The first leaned right of center. So those were the days when we in the Progressive Caucus were the rowdiest. But even from the basement, we got stuff done. And although more conservative, it was Speaker Finneran who went across the state talking to all the chambers of commerce about the need to raise new revenue during the recession, a model for all of us. Then the pendulum swung, and the next speaker was more progressive, and so my situation changed. When appointments came out, the Globe headline read, "DeMacy tilts House to the left," with pictures of me and Byron Rushing. I will always be grateful to Speaker DeMacy for appointing me to be the first House chair of what was then a new committee, the Joint Committee on Mental Health and Substance Abuse. His speakership included universal health, mental health parity, and marriage equality. We have a lot to thank Speaker DeMacy for. Having tilted right and then left, the House next steered to the center. To be really honest, I got off to a bit of a shaky start with Speaker DeLeo because of a small disagreement on whether or not we should bring casinos to Massachusetts. But as I pointed out a few years later in my speech nominating him to be Speaker in a subsequent session, he found common ground with me by supporting a budget amendment I filed to increase funding for addictive gambling services. And from then on, we worked together. I was grateful that he appointed me to be the chair on the Committee on Elder Affairs. Who knew what a job that would turn out to be? COVID hit nursing homes with a vengeance, and the job became painful but urgent. And finally, and a special thank you to you, Mr. Speaker. Recognizing my years of experience here and apparently thinking I had something to offer, you honored me by bringing me into your leadership team. Thank you. It means a great deal to me. And it was you, Mr. Speaker, who supported my signature issues. Your support when you were majority leader for my bill for gender equity and disability insurance is what pushed it over the finish line. And it was you who supported my Public Lands Preservation Act after I'd been filing it for 2 decades. And this session, you supported my top priority for what I am still hoping to accomplish before retiring, which is ending the state's incarceration of civilly committed men who suffer from addiction but have not been charged with any crime. Still hoping for that conference report. Additional thank yous. Thank you to the Majority Leader and the Chair of Ways and Means. Both of you have always provided me with support and friendship, regardless of what my position was in the House. I could always turn to each of you for candor and advice. Some of my biggest accomplishments here I owe to you. You both, Chair of Ways and Means, Majority Leader, both play a tremendously positive role in this House. I want both of you to know that I recognize it and appreciate it. Shout out to some additional friends, the gentleman from the Back Bay who gave me important advice at some key moments, the gentleman from Dedham who provides me with what he once called my home away from home at the best movie theater in Massachusetts, the gentleman from Natick, with whom I can always laugh, the gentleman from New Bedford, always good to schmooze with, the lady from Provincetown, who has been a good friend, and my newest friend from the freshman class, the gentleman from Concord, with whom I've developed a special bond, especially since the events of October 7. And thank you to the minority party, always the loyal opposition. How different we are from Washington. We do, for the most part, manage here to express our differences with respect. And a bunch of the time, we even work together. May it be a model for the nation. And thank you to our amazing clerk and House counsel, 2 people who are always there to answer every question. I cannot imagine having served without their help. And thank you to the court officers and to the rangers and to the staff who clean the building after hours. All of you make this place a safe and comfortable place in which to work. And last, but absolutely not least, I want to thank House staff. The Speaker's staff and the Ways and Means staff are fabulous, especially Whitney Ferguson, John Walsh, Chris Torrey, and Tim Sheridan. And my own staff has been amazing over the years. I especially want to thank Dmitry Gridnev and Brendan Morris, both of whom have worked for me for many years, and Ellen Gibson, who joined my team this session. I'm so grateful for all that this wonderful staff does for me, for my constituents, and for the people of Massachusetts. In closing, I'd like to say that I hope during the years I've served, these 26 years, that I've achieved 3 goals. One goal is based on the Jewish idea of tikkun olam, the repair of the world. I have been guided by that idea in trying to do what I can to make the world a better place. As to my other 2 goals, I hope I have honored the memory of my parents, and I hope I've made my children proud. Thank you. It has been an honor serving with all of you.